Greg DeRoche, the president and CEO of the Family Policy Alliance. It's a privilege to have you with us tuning in here. We're going to encourage you to share this video, to comment. We want you to participate. We have an amazing guest. Roger Severino. He is one of America's great leaders. He is new to his current job, where he serves as the vice president of domestic policy for the Heritage Foundation, an organization that Family Policy Alliance is privileged to work in partnership with very frequently. Roger has also had a lot of other experience. He worked for President Trump at the head of the Civil Rights Office for the Department of Health and Human Services. He also has worked for the Ethics and Public Policy Center. He's worked for the Department of Justice, and he worked for the Beckett Fund right after he graduated from Harvard Law School. He's an amazing leader, talented man, a national leader in religious liberty, the rights of conscience, the administrative state, and information privacy. It's a privilege to have you with us today, Roger. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you, Craig.
Well, we're going to jump right into it. We're going to talk about three things, but I want to break them down so we talk about the three things kind of individually so the audience can follow us. We're talking about Biden and this gender ideology that seems to be a administration-wide push. We're going to talk about Title IX, just refresh everybody, remind them of what's at stake here, and then the Biden rule related to that. So let's jump in with the Biden administration. They normally a president's activities correlate with what's going on in the world. You'd have a president right now focused on inflation, focused on peace, all sorts of other things, crime reduction. Here we have a president where objectively, and in 30 or 100 years, you're going to look back and say, clearly their focus almost entirely has been on advancing gender ideology. It's in more than 100 bills. It seems to be everywhere, the focus on a daily basis of this administration. Does it just seem that way, or what have they already done? What are some of the things that they're trying to do right now, Roger?
This is true. This is not a priority of the American public. However, a sliver of the president's base, the most vocal ideological groups of the far left, have come to dominate the policies coming out of the Biden administration. He started by appointing a radical on abortion and gender ideology to be the Secretary of Health and Human Services. And it's gotten worse from there. Out of the gate, he issued an executive order on sexual orientation and gender identity under the banner of equity, right? It's no longer equality, this is equity, which is this new buzzword that we all got to be worried about because of what it means. It means coercion on the fundamental questions of human identity. That's what it actually means. And he said he was going to do a top to bottom review and use a whole of government approach to push this gender ideology. It really came to the fore when it came to the confirmation hearing of Ketanji Brown Jackson. She was asked very plainly, what does it mean to be a woman? When President Biden said he was going to appoint an African-American woman, well, okay, what does it mean to actually be a woman? And she said, you know what? I'm not a biologist. I'm not in a position to answer that question. This is a question that any 5-year-old could answer. But because of this gender ideology that the administration has been pushing, this nominee was not able to answer that basic question. And it's a question of, is there a fundamental basis for human biology when it comes to sex and a person's identity? And this has deep implications for science, for medicine, for civil rights, discrimination, federally funded programs, pronoun usage. It goes on and on and on. The implications are grave. And the Trump administration, we pushed back on this ideology because it was unscientific. The Obama administration had tried to slip it into various regulations and laws, and we pushed back, rolled them all back. However, with this new administration, through executive orders and then through guidance, enforcement, discretion, all sorts of press releases, they're trying to change the fundamental understanding of what it means to be a human person, and they're doing it using every lever of government they have available.
Well, it's apropos, that they're going after, or I should, it's ironic actually. They're going after the very voters that A lot of people credit for returning the Democratic Party to the majority in 2018. They said that Republicans were too slow to acknowledge the workplace harassment that women have endured for centuries, and that cost them women and suburban moms and other voters. But they're very concerned about this. Now, the next thing we're going to talk about here is Title IX. Women, I've got a beautiful wife of coming up on 24 years. I've got 3 daughters. I think a lot of the stuff that women have endured is very real. That our country's got a long way to go on making sure that they're equal, not equitable, but full on equal in the treatment of women. And one of the major steps forward in our country's history, long fought for, is Title IX. And my daughters have benefited from that greatly by having school sports available to them in high schools that just simply weren't there a generation or two ago before Title IX. Tell us a little bit about what Title IX actually does, though. I'm just giving the anecdote there of it means more school sports, but it's bigger than that, isn't it, Roger?
It is, and it covers the field when it comes to all educational programs and activities. This was passed in 1972 when the issue of equality of women and girls was a true federally required issue to be addressed. There were not equal opportunities for women and girls, and you saw the biggest manifestation was in the change when it came to sports. After Title IX was passed, it said that federally funds with respect to education must have equal treatment for women and girls. You saw a massive growth in sports programs in schools, which were in many ways a gateway to scholarships. It helped build confidence in women and girls. It gave them an opportunity to grow that was not being provided on equal terms with men. That was a landmark law that helped balance the field so that we have such incredible opportunities now for women that are inspiring a whole generation of young girls to be the best they can be on the athletic field and also in schools. That acknowledged a fundamental difference between men and women. Equality does not mean being identical. Equality between men and women requires, even as Justice Ginsburg said in a famous case in United States versus Virginia, that there are differences that are biological and real that have to be respected. And that is fully consistent with equality. So the case dealt with whether or not VMI had to admit women as cadets, and the court said they had to be admitted. However, Justice Ginsburg said, you have to recognize you're going to need separate living facilities for the women that are going to be in this environment. And you'd have to have a different standard for physical fitness and those sorts of things. So acknowledge that men and women are built differently. And as I started with this talk, the Biden administration does not believe that. They believe that there is a gender ideology, that a person's sex is, quote, assigned at birth, that there are no longer mothers, they are birthing people. Literally, birthing people is in Biden administration documents right now. Reducing people to, if the biology matters, to just biological body parts. This isn't a woman or a man, this is a person with a uterus, or this is a person with a prostate. That is just offensive to the identity of men and women, boys and girls. We've gone too far down this road to actual equality that respects the differences and doesn't use that as a way of treating people worse, as used to be done, but to treat people as true equals and give equal opportunity. What happened with Leah Thomas, the swimmer, who's a biological male that is crushing women in the pool and denying women opportunities to be on the podium, right? You saw that famous picture. You had the three swimmers that were second, third, and fourth. Well, that number 4 was driven off the podium because a biological male, Leah Thomas, got first place. And that is an image that is going to sear through. And little girls that are seeing, maybe I could be on that podium, are going to be discouraged knowing that a biological male was able to do it and had such an advantage before they ever get to the starting blocks.
And so this is what we're up against. We have this radical ideology that I don't even believe the Democratic Party itself agrees with, if from the polls that I've seen, that's being advanced by the Biden administration. They're attacking Title IX, and there's a proposed rule. What are they trying to do with this rule that they're proposing related to Title IX.
Yes, and people need to understand we are governed now, unfortunately, by bureaucrats who are handing down rules. These are folks who are unaccountable. They get to write the rules that govern our daily lives now. When Title IX was passed in 1972, it explicitly talked about women and men, boys and girls, separate facilities, those sorts of things. It just presumed the biological realities that matter. This proposed rule is going to redefine sex away from a biological basis to say sex is something, quote, assigned at birth, that you don't know a person's sex for real until they tell you. And this is among children, right? And Title IX covers all educational programs and activities, which means a person would have to be treated according to the sex they identify in all respects. So if a boy identifies as a girl, they would have to be treated as a girl by school authorities and other schools and classmates. Otherwise, it could be accused of bullying. This goes down to the issue of pronouns, overnight camps, access to sports. So we have the swimming and track, where biological males are destroying records because they're taking those spots away from girls. Then you also have intimate facilities, locker rooms and bathrooms. We've had cases now where boys who identify as girls are entering into these, what should be safe spaces for women and girls, and committing offenses. We had this issue in Loudoun County, Virginia, where a boy identifying as fluid was wearing a skirt and sexually assaulted a girl in the girls' bathroom. And that was one of the reasons that the parents stood up and said, enough is enough with this gender ideology. We're pushing back. And that's why Glenn Youngkin won in significant part, because of parents finally realizing the woke ideology and the gender ideology is affecting their own kids. And this is going to be nationalized with rulemaking coming from the Department of Education on Title IX, saying that the new rules are going to be gender identity based on what a student says they are, and everybody has to conform to it. Quote, affirm their gender identity and their choices. And if you don't, you'll be labeled a discriminator. It flips Title IX on its head. Title IX was meant to prevent discrimination against women, and this is going to write it into the law through regulations. It's the exact opposite of what the American people want, and certainly contrary to the laws that were passed by Congress in 1972.
And it squishes the hopes and dreams of untold thousands, if not millions, of girls and women trying to be their best and to live out their hopes and dreams. And it's shocking, shocking, shocking. Now, our audience is very engaged, Roger, very engaged. I think you know a lot of people. You've worked with us over the years at the variety of capacities that we just talked about. There are things we can do, right? I mean, you've worked in the administration. A lot of conservatives will come in. They can have better paying jobs elsewhere, but if they can make a difference, roll up their sleeves and serve in these high roles as you have, they can affect the rulemaking process. And there are things that we can do on the outside. Like, for example, Family Policy Alliance, we actually have a meeting scheduled with the Department of Education. People don't know that they have a right as citizens to ask for these things, to slow it down. It can be disregarded by the input that you give, but they serve us. They're our government. So what are some of the things that we could be doing as citizens to speak into this rule, even if we can't affect its outcome? It's being politically driven by a president, but what can we do to make a difference?
You have to make your voice be heard. People are used to calling their members of Congress that's part of the democratic process, to influence your members. People are used to that. They're not so much used to writing in comments on proposed regulations from agencies. That is not what the founders envisioned as how democracy would work, but unfortunately, this is where we are. We're being governed by bureaucrats, and the people of the right-thinking Americans have an opportunity to influence what those bureaucrats do through the comment process. An agency is required to issue proposed regulations before they're finalized, which gives the opportunity for the public to submit comments. Tell them what you think. It could be short, it could be long, but it has to be. You submit comments on regulations.gov once the proposed rule is out. Sometimes you only have 30 days. This administration is breaking norms. We gave 60 days for rules under Trump for people to comment. They're doing 30 days, in some cases 22 days. So you have to be ready to go. Follow us on Twitter, get our newsletters, Family Policy Alliance is doing this great work. Heritage Foundation is doing great work. I also have a hat at the Ethics and Public Policy Center I wear. We're doing all this to inform the public as to when these rules are coming out, and you have an opportunity to comment. When you comment, the agency is first required to read it and required to respond. And if they don't respond adequately to substantive criticisms to the rule, it could actually be struck down by courts. They have a duty to have rational rulemaking. It has to be reasoned. They can't just bully people without doing the hard work. And what we see with gender identity, it's not based on science. They have not done their homework. They're trying to use it as a cover of anti-discrimination or as a cover of health, when this is hurting children. It's not only hurting the children that are being pushed off the podiums, these girls, it's also hurting the children themselves who are being pushed on a one-way track to, quote, transition. When you leave kids to their own devices, let nature take its course, upwards of 90% of kids who have any gender dysphoria issues grow out of it on their own. But we're trying to medicalize kids, put them on this treadmill that leads to permanent sterility, and then saying, and now you have this civil right. Now you're being treated as a girl or as a boy, regardless of your actual biology. And then you could get, of course, it'll be a zero sum. You'll have boys and girls spaces and boys on the podium on both the boys' side and the girls' side. And that's going to deprive girls of so many opportunities.
Well, I think that the administration thinks they're smarter than the rest of us. I think they think if they pass a rule or a law that people will fall in line. And I think they're learning that that's not what America is. That's not who we are, that we've not been that way for a single day of our existence as a country or the decades that preceded our becoming a country. And so people are going to fight back. And we'd encourage you, our audience, we're with Roger Severino. He's the vice president of domestic policy for the Heritage Foundation, a very well-traveled and experienced leader in conservative thought circles in America. He's given us some great advice. We're going to make it easy for you, those of you that are watching this video, and we want you to sign up for our emails, sign up for our social media. We're going to post here and look into the comments. You're going to see posts for Roger's Twitter. You're going to see posts for Heritage Foundation as well. We want you to get involved there because we're going to give you links that allow you to go right to the rulemaking process and write in your comments, because we want you, as Roger said, it's unfortunate we're getting here, but this is a new phase of advocacy. We do need to raise some arguments. We do need to bang some cymbals, make some noise, get involved in the rulemaking process as Christians, or we're going to be disregarded and just prayerfully hoping that the Supreme Court fixes things many years later. But there's things we can do now. We want to submit those comments. Roger, just one last word on the comments. People, we want them to be respectful. You know, swear words are not outlawed, but they're lazy. You know, if you're going to go after somebody, be thoughtful. And the key here is they have to respond to it. So we want to encourage people probably to ask questions that require some thought and research from folks, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And quantity matters, and so does quality. So if you become aware of the rule and you figure out, wow, this is what's going to happen, they're going to say it's discriminatory against women to not allow men in the locker rooms. What is this about? Then you start commenting and ask them the hard questions. Bring out your own stories of your own kids, your own experiences, and then relate it to the rule itself and say, explain, Department of Education, how this does not erode what Title IX is all about. Put the burden on them to explain themselves. They have to. And if you run a school, how this is going to impact your own school. If you run a PTA, how it's going to impact you there. If your college experiences, anything that's federally funded with respect to education could be at issue here. And it's not just the gender identity issues. It's going to be on the standards of proof in sexual harassment claims, where unfortunately people have been railroaded too many times without being given due process. Many times our sons could be put before kangaroo courts, ideologically motivated entities that would be required by the Biden administration, right? The Trump administration pulled back and said there has to be some standard of fairness in these things. The Biden administration might pull back on that. So this rule, we expect, is going to contain all sorts of terrible things. And as many things you could comment on as possible, respectfully, the better.
Well, we will get our audience doing that. Please, please, please be commenting on this and sharing this video. But look for, if you have not signed up for our emails, Heritage Foundation's emails that Roger works on, we got the links here. We want you to do that so we can keep you apprised. Roger, we got a couple more minutes here. I just want you to comment on the conscience rule. Unfortunately, we're not given a lot of good news here in this conversation about what's coming out of the Biden administration. Give whet people's appetite. We can follow up and have a deeper dive on it, but almost unbelievable here.
We expect another terrible rule is going to be coming out with respect to conscience rights. President Trump, was the strongest, most pro-life, pro-religious president in history because he stacked the administration with people who knew the issue and fought for it. And part of that fight was establishing protections in regulations. And we had 26 different statutes that protected conscience in health. Big ones had to deal with abortion, assisted suicide, and sterilizations. You cannot force doctors to perform abortions. You can't force people to pay for them. You can't force insurance companies to cover it. Yet the Biden administration is trying to undo all of these protections one by one. And that's why once this rule comes out, we expect it's going to strip that away. It's going to attack the Conscience and Religious Freedom Division that I helped stand up so that we treat those rights at least as well as every other civil right. So be on the lookout for this. This administration is in the pocket of big abortion, and this is going to be their opportunity to pay them back, to fund big abortion, to give them as much money as possible, and to force doctors and you and me to pay for abortion. And that's a shame. Whatever one thinks about abortion, hopefully Roe v. Wade will be in the ash heap of history come June. But whatever happens with that, almost all Americans of goodwill say don't force people to perform abortions. Yet this administration ignores that and is going to run roughshod over those rights with this expected rulemaking.
I think this is just another form of Satan having our country by the neck. It seems that I know slavery is not an equal comparison. It's truly apples and oranges. But at the root of it, we're talking about a group of people that don't think people are human beings. Right. And good prevailed. And we passed the 13th and 14th Amendment. We got rid of slavery in our country because our friends of all different races and creeds and religious backgrounds are fully human, as are babies. Babies are a human being. It's just that simple. And they should be given equal rights. And this to me, Roger, it gets me so upset. It would be like the federal government forcing people to accept slavery. In the northern states, or to change their mind and say this is a good because the federal government has said it's a good for the benefit of these radical people that don't believe in the value of human life. And it's offensive.
It's so totalitarian that they want to force people who object to use their own hands and talents to take a life. That should offend everyone.
And it's way outside of what we fight our wars for and the freedoms we enjoy in our Constitution. And having a warrior like you, a happy warrior at Heritage, which is a new role for you. Congratulations on that. It's a privilege to be with you. I'm sure we're going to have you on again soon. This is a tradition we like to have. We like to wrap up our calls because these are heady topics. It's not always good news, with some encouragement for our audience. So you're at Heritage. You've been involved with a lot of different organizations. Tell our audience, is what they do important? Should they be involved? Are they moving the needle? What do you think their involvement's doing right now?
There is a groundswell caused in part because of President Biden's own mistakes. When he pushes a radical agenda, the American people say enough is enough. And we've seen this with what's happened in Florida on the parental rights bill. We saw what happened that DeSantis stood up to Disney and is winning. They just did a poll of whether people supported DeSantis or Disney, and they're supporting DeSantis. What happened in Virginia, the people rose up to fight the woke ideology on race and gender identity. I am so optimistic and encouraged of what we're going to see in the next few months as the American people having their voice heard on this, and that will set the stage for further successes. This is a difficult time for the conservative movement, given that we have radicals in power and in Congress and in the presidency. But I think the times are changing, and it's going to be very soon where we're going to see that happen. So I'm very optimistic about the future.
I love it. I love it. Thank you. We're with Roger Severino, the Vice President of Domestic Policy for the Heritage Foundation, a great leader, a great American. Roger, it's been a privilege to have you, and you've got me excited. I think you're right. I think we're in for big and positive changes with these overreaches. But to our audience, I'm going to implore you, please comment on this video. Please share it with your friends. Please get involved. Please sign up. We're going to be letting you know when these rule changes are proposed so we can do something about it together. We can raise our voices. This is why we come together in an alliance at the Family Policy Alliance. So please join us in fighting for our great country. Thank you all for being on the show. Thank you again, Roger, and we'll be talking to you real soon. God bless.